Hey, everybody. You're listening to What Are You Doing in Denmark, the podcast that helps you make Denmark make sense. Does this voice sound a little familiar to you? No, it's not King Frederick. My name is Mike Walsh, and if you've been a listener since the beginning, first of all, thank you. But you may remember I graced this microphone before, but sadly I've had to give up my hosting duties. But this week, coming out of retirement, and I get to take over as the host to interview the normal hosts, Annie Samples and Derek Hartman.
Yay.
Yes.
Who better to interview you guys than an OG? Like, it's
The
just nice to
OG.
be back.
Yeah.
Here. Yes, it's nice to be back in the chair.
We're honored
Yes.
to have you with us today.
So now I get to have a hard-pressing interview with you guys, get to all your deep, dark secrets, histories,
All the things we
Ooh.
don't...
all the things that you don't talk about because you're the
When we have
host.
control, we don't...
Yeah. Oh, I'm so curious.
Bring it on.
No more control of the narrative for you guys. I get to be in charge. But I think it'll be super fun.
Yeah, totally.
For the audience also to get a sense of who the two of you are. Who are the voices behind the mic? More than just the voices behind the mic.
You don't think I overshare too much already?
No.
Do people tell you that?
No, I just feel
You
like
feel
I
that
do
way?
all
Yeah.
the time. And
yeah.
I just love to post, and I love to
Sure.
just talk and blah, blah, blah. So sometimes I'm like, Annie, just take a few steps back. They got it. Okay.
But I will say that's as I've gone on the creator journey with you, Derek, on this. Like, it's always kind of funny because it's like, what part of my life do I want to share? What do I not want to share? Like, what is the world's me versus the me's me? I guess.
Totally.
Like, I guess maybe before we get into like how do you balance that? Because obviously, like, you have a family,
Exactly.
So you obviously want to protect your family and your husband and everything else.
Right.
How do you kind of walk that line on what you share and don't?
Yeah, that's actually a really good question, and probably the only reason that I don't share every little minute detail in my life is because I consider not only my 4 kids, but my husband as well, who's actually quite private, and I respect him for that. So a lot of safety factors into it. Of course, I don't.
Sure.
I like to not share my kids' names so much because I don't want people I don't want them to really be Googleable, even if maybe they are, but at least I'm not putting it out there, so much. Obviously, I don't share where they go to school. I try not to really post about their exact dates of birth or anything.
Sure.
Just keeping it as vague as possible. I always post after the fact. I've never live post when I'm out of the house or when I do things with the kids. And then of course, I'm very, very careful about the state in which I post myself and my kids. I'm not going to post them in the bathtub or in a bikini or that sort of stuff. Myself in a bikini is fine because I chose to do that.
Right.
I'm still waiting for these tattoos to get lasered off, but
But thank you for taking us on that journey too.
Right?
Well,
It's really cool.
It's so fun. Do you guys have any tattoos you want to remove?
Oh, I don't know. I
I only have one tattoo.
Yeah?
And I got
Keep
it. I got
it.
it here, so I'm happy with it.
Okay, great.
have
Yeah,
a couple that I'm not wild about that, but that's fine. I have one on my back that I never see. So
Okay, yeah. The ones on my back, I have a huge one on my back that needs to go, but since I don't see it, it doesn't bother me so much.
Sure.
But I have one here that I'm that's got to go immediately. It's got to go, and that's the reason I don't wear bikinis. Anyway, that was a complete.
That's a detour.
I'm the queen of
things that
detours.
we don't dive into. Yeah,
Exactly.
I'm glad you brought it up.
I have really bad tattoos. Really bad tattoos. People get mad at me for saying don't get tattoos, and I'm just being silly because I still have tattoos that I love and I'm keeping. But I think that tattoos should be illegal until your prefrontal cortex is
Oh yeah.
fully
developed.
formed.
It's 25.
Honestly, because it's as soon as I turned 25, it was regret immediate. You know what I'm saying? Crazy. Anyway, so how do you balance that?
Ooh, yeah, that's tough. I think very similar where I try to be conscious of what I'm posting and how I'm replying to comments, especially because there are
so good
certain
at that.
things that I get really sensitive about, and I have to be like, do not let this bother you. Do not. One thing, for example, that I often get almost not hate on, but people comment on a lot is how I speak Danish.
No.
And literally just
Oh my God.
how I pronounce the names of Danish cities and towns. To the point where it really discourages me from speaking Danish or putting myself out there that way because I don't like being that vulnerable. It's one thing to be
Valid.
in Danish class and or have a friend say, oh, you didn't say that quite right. But I just, for some reason, that really... I don't like opening myself up to that.
It's such a vulnerable position. I don't think a lot of people understand that.
I don't think, exactly. And I feel like there's this thing that Danes will say everybody does, but I think Danes do it a little more, where they just like laughing at people mispronouncing Danish. And maybe it's a little bit of deflection because people like making jokes about how Danish sounds. But to me, I'm like, I'm really trying. It's one thing to make fun of a tourist or somebody who isn't trying to integrate, but like, I don't think everybody realizes the negative impact that can have.
Yeah.
You know? And so sometimes, I get really sensitive about
I totally get it.
about that. And like in the comment section, I'm like, why am I
why
am I
really struggle
so
to hold back, and it depends on what mood I'm in, but sometimes I really want to eat people a new one.
Yeah, sure.
It's just really fun. I feel like people try to read me and I can just like read them so much harder. But then I have to consider, like my kids' friends' parents are reading this, they're seeing it. I understand that like what I post a lot of people can see, but sometimes I forget that people can see me replying to comments as well.
Yes, yeah.
Sure.
Then I have to consider like brand partnerships and those kinds of things. And I'm like, you're so lucky that this is my job, because if it wasn't, then
I would read you to filth in there. You had a bit of a journey yourself as far as handling the comments section.
How was that?
Okay. Oh, well, yeah. Mike's got all the tea. I
got all the
my
tea.
emotional reaction.
How have you evolved as a content creator managing difficult comments? Because people see it as a two-way street, and so like, oh, you started the conversation, I'm going to keep it going, and I'm going to keep it real. Like, how have you, Derek, evolved in handling that? It's also an evolution from being on your Facebook page and saying some crap to somebody to suddenly like you're a visible face with 30,000 subscribers and millions of views and everything else.
Yeah. I think originally when we started, for anybody who like isn't familiar with how I got started doing content, was in 2021 on YouTube, and that was in the second lockdown, and it was very much in the style of, which I think is your style too, Annie, of just thinking like, what would I want to show my friends and family about Denmark? And that's kind of the approach that I took. And then realizing that it was a lot of Danes who were curious, which was really neat. But then there were often things that would be like, oh, actually, this is what that means. Or, oh, I don't think you're interpreting that correctly. And I would sometimes take that to heart. Like, oh, you're challenging my experience, you're invalidating things. And then I really started looking at it as people are actually just helping. And even with the language, to go back to that, that's probably the intent as well. But sometimes I'm like, I'm not looking for a critique. I'm just
It's valid.
And when you are doing this, often the first thing I'll do in the morning is look at my Instagram or look at YouTube. And sometimes there's comments where I'm like, oh, that's not how I wanted to start my day. And it can really affect your mindset. I started looking at things in a way, and I heard this advice on a podcast from Trixie Mattel from A Drag Queen. Shout out to Trixie Mattel, who said, if you let that one person outshine the thousands, millions, however many people that viewed that and gave it a heart, or viewed that and didn't say anything, or give you really nice positive things, you're letting that one person, you're telling them that they're more important than all of the other people that do support you or are subscribed or do follow. Don't let that one person outshine all of these people that are cheering you on. So, I try to think of that. That
is really good. And something that I think about is like, I have never left a rude comment. I've been online since the dawn of the internet, and I've never, as far as I can remember, left a rude comment on anybody's anything ever. And I would have to be, I have mental health issues, don't get me wrong. I would have to be so disturbed and like in such a dark and bad place in order to do something like that. And I just have to like have empathy for those people that must be in a really rough and dark place. But still, it's not an excuse. You know what I'm saying? Like, it's not an excuse to be mean to people. But
it's kind of how the internet has always been from the beginning.
Right, it's true.
The first comment section. It's been that way.
I think it's really easy to and go ahead and hate me for this, but I think as Americans, I feel like we get it a little harder because it's easy to come after the country that we come from and deflect any sort of negativity towards that. And sometimes I'm like, okay, this was I made a little joke about rye bread, and you're bringing up mass shootings.
Not
the same.
Whoa.
Not the same.
That escalated way too quickly.
Okay, fine. I'll eat the rye bread. But also, if it was that good, you would be able to buy it everywhere, and you can't.
That's
you have to
true.
Take it on holiday
Okay,
too,
valid point.
So now we're going to get comments. So
there
well
we go.
done.
Yeah.
You've opened the door.
Exactly.
For
Now we're
Yeah.
getting death threats.
So it's funny, like talking about like your experience as content creators. I remember a couple months ago being at lunch with some colleagues, and they were talking about how like their kids and their kids' friends talking about what they want to be when they grow up.
Yeah.
I want to be a YouTuber. I want to be a content creator. Maybe to kind of go behind the curtain a little bit, what is something that maybe the public doesn't realize takes as much time as it really does? So like people see the content creator, they see the picture, they see the fun trips that you get to go on and things like that. What are the things that actually take time and really eat up your day that people don't realize is so much a part of the job? Because it is a job that you guys have.
Yeah. And the best job ever.
Oh, yeah,
my
so
gosh.
cool.
You're the editing king. I'm like less of an editor, but even the editing, I'm like, for me, a lot of coordinating, and I've since signed with an agency and I'm so thankful, but coordinating back and forth emails with brands and stuff. This sounds like such first world problems.
It can be hard to value yourself there and put like a monetary
That's
value
so
on
true.
that, you know, because it's very difficult to look at yourself and what you do and say, okay, this is worth this much.
Yeah,
you know,
yeah,
it's
yeah.
one thing to create a product that is, you know, you can see a laptop in the store and you know how much a MacBook costs.
Yeah.
But to negotiate that is really tough. So I think
It is tough. I'm so thankful that I have an agent. And the unfortunate aspect of the industry is that no matter what, somebody somewhere will do it for free. You know what I'm saying?
Yes.
Something that really occupies a lot of my time is engaging with the audience, which is really actually so valuable to me because I do really want to create a community and sort of keep the rude commenters at bay, you know? Yeah, just posting, and it just takes up so much of the time. And then as you get older and realize like how valuable your time is, you do realize this is a job. And I just have so much respect for really all content creators of any kind. And it's something that I think has gotten a really bad rap. Why do you think that is? Why do you think content creation and influencing has gotten such a bad rap over the past, since its existence?
Yeah, that's a good question. I don't think it's taken seriously.
No.
And I think that's part of it. And I think it is interesting because our generation, we didn't grow up with that.
No.
But then we have kids who are, and who, you know, our nephews are same age as your older boys. And they, you know, our oldest nephew is like, thinks it's so cool. Like, oh, my uncle's a YouTuber. Oh, my uncle like loves telling like his baseball coach, oh, my uncle's a YouTuber. And to him, he sees Mr. Beast and all of these other creators and just thinks it's like the coolest thing.
Does he want to be a content creator? So does my
like,
oldest.
And wants to do like Fortnite videos and things like that.
Yeah.
Twitch and all that.
Yeah.
But then when I do sit down with him and I'll kind of show him, okay, this is what I'm doing this week. And he has no interest in any of the planning and all the things that go into it. So I think a lot of people don't understand what goes into it.
And maybe they'll
that's part
grow
of
that
it. Yeah.
skill over time. Yeah, I think a lot of people don't understand what goes into it. I think a lot of it is like primarily a female, well, less so now when you're thinking of like the Twitch and that sort of stuff, that's more male prominent. I do encourage men to get involved in the industry as much as possible because it is so predominantly female, which I think is incredible. And I love that. And it's very much like a safe space in that way. But I think there's a lot of like misogyny that goes in with like not respecting the industry in and of itself. But kids nowadays are wanting to do it. But what do you think is the most time consuming or like?
I definitely agree with you on the engagement piece because it's really, and that's a thing that I do love to do, but sometimes I realize, oh, okay, I'm just sort of replying to things, and sometimes you lose sight of the fact that is part of the gig. And you are creating a community, you are creating a dialogue, and that's part of that's part
because
of
if they weren't there, I wouldn't have my job.
Sure,
so I'm
exactly.
so grateful to everybody that follows or engages with my content. But I see a lot of creators that just straight up don't, and I'm like,
Right? How can you do that? And
I know.
Like,
Also,
how can you be that good that you don't have to do this?
But also like just morally, I want to appreciate these people because I don't know about you guys, but like before I was a content creator, I just loved following people online. I've just always been that girl that's just like been online, reading blogs, seeing vlogs as well. And I'm just really thankful that my career has ended up in the way that it has. It feels like a dream, honestly. And so I just really want to appreciate those people.
Yeah. And it's where you get the best ideas, I think. So, I mean, we like,
true.
you know, to break the fourth wall, like there are many things that have been discussed on this podcast that literally came from comments that you've gotten or I've gotten or at Weighted Pod, if you're following us on Instagram, plug. People have asked questions and we're like, wow, I never thought about that. People don't know that's enough. We should do an episode.
Exactly,
on this.
exactly.
And it's it's just, I think the whole thing is just trying to make people feel like they're not alone. And, that's the aspect that I like too, especially when, there are things, whether it's parenthood, like a lot of the things that you showcase or living abroad, like they're, like it's not all just weekend trips to Rome and these things. It's, there's a lot of things in day-to-day life that are worth sharing.
Yeah. I totally agree.
How do you balance the time piece? Because I think both of you have husbands that have more traditional 9-to-5 type jobs. And I know for myself, like, sure, I may answer an email at night or get a little something done Sunday evening to start for the week, but like you don't punch a clock. How do you handle that piece of it? I'm guessing it's probably a mix of a blessing and a curse where it gives you more freedom and flexibility, but it means that now you have to be your own boss and manage your own time. How do you navigate that?
Yeah. I do try to keep like working hours for the most part. And like tomorrow I have a campaign that I'm shooting, but it's like going to a museum, like again, best job ever, going to a museum, experiencing that. It's incredible. But for the most part, when it comes to, answering emails, creating content, editing voiceovers, etc., I try to do that honestly between the hours of 9 and 2. And then that's when the whole pickup routine starts for the kids. But then in that, there's still a lot of the engagement piece that I do because there are certain hours where you have better engagement. So I have to sort of capitalize on that. So it's a lot of juggling for sure. What about you?
I try to batch things. That makes it a little bit easier.
Oh, smart.
Yeah. And the nice thing is, I mean, a little behind the scenes of like what we do here on the podcast is, there are days where like Annie and I will come in, and whether it's just the two of us that day or we have two guests where, we know that we can come into the studio at Coho and do a 3-hour recording, and we can get 4 episodes of this podcast and some other content like out of the way. And I don't want to say out of the way as if it's a burden, but batching things
box,
like that really makes it a lot easier. You have to be super organized that way, but it's tough because it can bleed into those evening hours. I try to also do things, for example, like if I want to go do some fitness, there's things that I always prioritize for myself, which is like, okay, I need to do something for myself. So I'm going to have 90 minutes of fitness today. I'll try to do that maybe in the afternoon when I know it's not going to be as busy in the gym. And then I'll maybe have some evening time back where then I'll do that editing because I can't turn my brain off at.
Yeah.
And 100%. I'm not doing the kid pickup, so that helps.
You can pick up some of my kids if you want to. Feel free, actually. Right. That's so fine. But no, sometimes I do have to force myself, like you're saying, like I need to fit in some, movement or whatever it is. And sometimes I have to remember, like, go out and live a life also because you need to have something to create content about. You know what I'm saying? That is an important thing to keep in mind. Don't just sit here and
and then there's times where, for example, like this week there are that we're recording. There are some events around, and a little bit in the stories, but that's it. I'm like, no, I want to enjoy this, and I want to.
I totally have those moments too, where it's like moments that you would think that exactly. Just do what feels best for you. Really just have to go so instinctually, but I have so many moments where I think that sometimes I feel like maybe my audience is expecting me to like create some big experience about this, but I just want to live in the moment. And sometimes I think some of the content that gets the best engagement is like the boring little stuff. So it's fine. But I will say, in terms of the managing time wise and having a traditional husband figure, like I personally could not do this without my husband's like stability and contribution and everything like that. So it really, really, for me, has taken a supportive partner, because like there was a time period too where he was like my cameraman, like helping me edit. He was making my media kit and everything. So I think that's a really important piece. You really have to have people in your corner. So I'm thankful for that.
And sometimes having them on that schedule can help to frame your week.
That's true. That's true. Because you want to be available when they're available.
Exactly.
And now we're going to eat dinner and we're going to go on this date or whatever it is. So it's valid. Yeah.
Let's take it back, because as you mentioned, like as we were growing up, all three of us are 90s kids. So that, there wasn't content creation. The internet was maybe, AOL, Instant Messenger, and that's about it. So
You don't have to date us that hard.
Yeah.
What?
That
What?
was-
I don't know what you're talking
It's
about.
important to have context because it's been an evolution where you get here. So I want to talk
Yeah, it's
about
true.
where kind of you guys started. So I'll start with you, Annie. So what did you originally go study? What was your first kind of career? What did you think you were
love.
going to be when you grew up?
Yeah. Oh
back
my
when
gosh.
you were just growing up.
Marine biologist, obviously.
everybody in the
everybody.
90s,
I think that's like a Lisa Frank thing, or like and Free Willy combined, marine biology. I actually went so far as to go to a specialized middle school that had a marine biology program. And I went to Corpus Christi in Texas, collected specimens. Didn't pan out. Biology is really hard. Have you guys taken a biology course before?
AP Bio in high school.
And
That's it.
I took a college level one, and I was like, this is not for me.
I took bio in university too. Yeah.
Yeah.
It was
so hard.
tough.
It was like a D for me, like barely passing.
Is it more than just diagramming the cell and marking the Golgi apparatus?
That's
is it
too
beyond
much
that?
for me already.
Mitochondria is the powerhouse.
Is it? I don't even know. Ooh.
I don't remember.
So I wanted to be a marine biologist. Then I just wanted a boyfriend for a long time. You know what I'm saying? Like that was the vibe. Then I was like, I'm a lead singer of a rock and roll band. Did that for a while. That was really fun. And just kind of wanted to vibe. You know what I'm saying? I think what I was really looking for was like having a family, a fun life, enjoyable times. But it's so crazy because, in the US, we don't get like the gap year, like,
Right.
So they're like,
How
go
do
to
we figure
college.
ourselves
I'm
out?
like, okay. This was 2005, 4 or 5. My sister was living in New York, and I was like, I will live in LA. And my sister was an actress, and I was like, or she still is an actress. I was like, I will be a fashion designer.
Love it.
I'm like not like I am kind of a fashion girly, but not to that extent. So I went to FITM, the Fashion Institute of Design and Merchandising, and that was such an interesting experience. I lived there for 9 months and was so scared. I I have many incredible and hilarious stories from that time. But then while I was there, I actually ended up taking a creative writing class that was a really huge success for me. And I ended up getting one of my papers. My professor used it to present at some like creative writing workshop, and it was included in a creative writing textbook, like as an example. And I was like, oh, I guess this is what I'm doing. So then I applied to Loyola University in Chicago, got in. My dad was like, that's not happening. You're coming back to Texas if you're going to a normal university. And I was like, valid. So I moved back, and then I found out with the journalism degree that you have to write a thesis, and my anxiety just could not cope. I was like, no, I like froze. And then I did, sorry, this is so long-winded.
But it's part of the fun part of the story. Like the journey
it was such a journey.
Because I can see like all the different pieces of
there
your story.
are
and
different
see it
pieces.
in your creation today.
Yeah,
I can
yeah.
see how
Yeah,
these
yeah.
elements are you.
Oh, yeah. Well, and so then I'm like very fascinated by the human experience, blah, blah, blah. So then I studied substance abuse and addictions education and rehabilitation studies. I just thought I was really into the show. What was it called? Intervention at the time.
Yes,
And I was like,
love that. Yeah.
I'm going to do that. And that was a really interesting degree. And then I finished that and couldn't get a job naturally because there's no funding for anything like that in the US or really anywhere. So I was like, I will move to New York and become a makeup artist. So I did that.
Wow.
And that was great. I worked in the industry for like 6 years, had my son, then moved to Portland, Oregon. And then, during all of this time, I was on like Tumblr, LiveJournal, Zanga.
So you were
Vine,
always
like-
doing the
Yeah, I was
some sort of
always
content, yeah.
online. I was like chronically online.
What kind of stuff were you doing? So like way back at the beginning, Tumblr, was it all around makeup or was it similar?
Just like
getting the
emo
life?
dump. Like, yeah, this is what happened. Just like very emo. I had a really strong interest in the arts, music, museums, etc. Always just sort of sharing about that sort of stuff. Yeah, and then I started sharing about like my experience as a mom, just kind of with my friends on Instagram and stuff. And then, long story long, end up moving here and start sharing here. TikTok comes out, and I was like, oh, I'm going to try this out. And that's what got things going in that department.
Wow.
And here we are today. What a crazy
So you
thing.
basically worked through like all the platforms. Just interesting that you've kind of built through kind of the history of social media.
Yeah,
Before,
yeah.
like, we didn't call it social media really.
No, just the internet.
It's just the internet.
Yeah. I'm just online. But no, yeah. TikTok was the first place that I had any sort of success. And honestly, I just, I was interested in the possibility of having that be a career, like I said, from the beginning. But I just enjoyed sharing my experience. I always found it really therapeutic. I think that's like the writing aspect. I think you do have to have a bit of like a writer in you in order to
100%.
do this job. And so, yeah, I'm just, like I said, so grateful that it all worked out. How about for you?
Yeah, well, I feel like I had a lot of zigs and zags, but now I don't.
Yeah. There's so many things in between there that you don't even want to. Maybe you do want to know. I don't know.
When I was little, I wanted to be an astronaut. I think everybody did. I wanted to go on the game show Double Dare and go to space camp. Because they always gave away a trip to space camp in Texas. Yeah.
Oh yeah, Houston.
Yeah, in Houston. Yeah, and we never did. Like I just was like training my little brother to like climb the wrong way up slides so we could do the physical challenges and everything.
Oh my gosh, that's so precious.
That was my dream.
How scary though was Legends of the Hidden Temple?
Gosh,
Every time anxiety.
I loved that one.
You
it
loved
was
it?
So much fun. Oh yeah.
The people that would jump out at you though.
So that was so scary.
Yeah, you're very jumpy.
I'm so
you
yeah,
were-
I couldn't do it. Everyone.
No, I
Yeah.
would've hit
Anyway, I did
somebody.
not mean to
Yeah.
interrupt. But Global Guts
Oh,
also.
Global
Okay,
Guts.
sorry.
Yes. Oh.
I did love guts. That was the aggro crab.
The aggro crab was
I wanted a piece of
legit.
it.
I want
You
to
can get a
climb that
piece on
thing.
eBay. People sell it every now and then.
Cool.
Yeah.
We gotta get one.
Prizes
So
for
the
it.
people that succeeded at guts but failed at life,
But failed at life.
Yeah, like, I
selling
need-
their key assets.
selling their aggro crag for meth money.
That sucks. Let's get some
Oh,
real rock up
sorry,
in
that
here.
was-
That's okay. That's dark, but that's funny.
That was
Okay.
sad.
Okay. Anyway, I'm so sorry.
Yeah, so
but
so
I
like
relate.
space camp didn't happen. So then I went to university for I started as education, and then I was like, oh no, I need to make money. So
Yeah.
then I switched to business, and then I worked in finance, and I did subprime mortgages when I first got out of school.
That's right,
So
you
I
ruined the American
ruined
economy.
the economy.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, that was me. And then I went back to school to get my teaching certification because then I thought, well, let's do that now, and that's
Yeah.
stable. Spoiler, it wasn't really.
Yeah.
And yeah,
Yeah. How did you like that?
it was okay. I really did like being a teacher. It was really cool. And then I got my master's in education. I really did enjoy that. So
Yeah.
for about 10 years before moving here, I was in the classroom. Yeah, and I taught business, which was cool. And then I
Like
taught
college level or?
at the high school level.
Wow.
And then I taught a civics course at a university in Philadelphia.
Jeez,
Yeah.
that's so impressive.
Yeah, it was great. But the cool thing is, I think a little bit like with your journey is like I still get to kind of lean on those things. So
Right.
of course there's like a business aspect of everything that we
Totally.
do. Sort of running, it's solopreneurship, I think is the buzzword. But we are running our own business in a way. So I lean on that, and then I think at anything content related, you are finding a way to explain something.
Yep.
Edutainment, I think,
Yeah,
is another sort of
totally.
buzzword. So I get to kind of lean on the education side as well, and
That's cool.
kind of marry those two things, and now do it in a creative way, which
Yeah.
I always loved the creative part. How can I do a lesson plan that will make these kids interested? You know,
Yeah.
that was always my way of looking at my classroom experience, and just thinking of like, okay, my favorite way of teaching was always kids learning when they're not even realizing that they're learning something.
It's the strongest way to learn anything, honestly. Yeah.
So if it was like a simulation or some kind of like game where they didn't even realize they were reviewing,
Right.
You're
like,
thing, I'm like, tricked you. You learned something, right? So I try to do that in my content too. I hope that comes through a little bit.
Totally. Yeah. I think that
I think we all have to do that.
Yeah, I think social media and these apps get a really bad rap, and of course, I am overly addicted. It's a problem, but it's a really good and strong resource for education, in my opinion.
As you've kind of gone through these journeys, what kind of advice would you give yourself back at the beginning of your content creation journey? Kind of looking back now, what advice would you give yourself? And it'll help a lot of our listeners that want to go down this journey themselves. They want to take the leap from kind of their personal Instagram to kind of make it grow.
Our nephews.
What do you like our nephews, like your
My
son?
son.
Your son, yeah.
What lesson would you give your younger self in order to take that journey?
Stay consistent.
Yeah.
Stay dedicated. Have confidence in what you're doing. Put out things that you're proud of, and don't worry so much about what people think about you. And just be yourself.
That's got to be a hard one because, like, literally the entire job of content creation is making people like you. But like the first piece of advice is don't stress about people liking everything that you do. How do you balance that?
Well, because you know that the people that are going to like you are just going to like you for who you are, and you don't want to like that. You know, I'm definitely a recovering people pleaser, and then you just have to realize like that's such a waste of energy and time, and you know, not to get all deep or whatever, but of course, at our core, we're all lovable and likable people. And maybe not everybody meshes with one another, but somebody out there meshes with you. A lot of people out there mesh with you. And by just being yourself and speaking your truth and trying to stay positive, I think is really helpful. You're going to find that audience that resonates with you, that is feeling helped and seen by you. You know, that's what I found.
Interesting that you become kind of a vessel for them because they see themselves in you.
Yeah. And that, like, I love following people online, and I try to find people that I resonate with and make me feel supported in some kind of way.
There are many times where you're sort of like building the airplane while it's flying, you know? So I think like starting out with some kind of system, starting out with some kind of a plan, whether it's a content calendar or just sort of like siloing your days. So I'll know like the weeks where I feel the most productive are the weeks where I'm like, okay, we're recording on Monday. Tuesday's going to be an edit day. I'm not replying to comments. I'm not posting new content. I'm only editing on Tuesday. That's my day off of everything else. I'm only editing. And then, you know, I can build myself a week that is more productive when I'm sort of siloing my activities and building a system for myself. I fall off of that so easily and so often. So be prepared for that too.
Okay.
But
factor that in, you know. Yeah,
you have to be ready for that. But I think the more that you can sort of like systemize your week, your plan, you know, the better, the easier it can be. And then you can pick up those other things of, oh, I should do an extra reel about whatever. Then you have the time to do it because you've kind of built a system that works for you.
It's funny how operational a creative exercise is with this, that you turn it into a bit of an assembly line. And perfect it and make it efficient in that way.
Oh, that's inspiring, actually. I'm so not.
I fail at it all the time, though.
Okay, well,
but the whiteboard looks really good in the living room.
Yes,
you have a whiteboard? Cool.
Yeah, that makes me feel like I have some
Sometimes
control.
I do have a whiteboard on my fridge, and I have like a notes app where I'm just like, remember to make this, and that's kind of it.
Yes, so true. Constantly having like notes in my phone of like, because you know, part of content is that you're constantly observing things and then retelling that story. So being a good storyteller, you know, part of that is realizing the stories you have to tell.
That's so true.
Everybody has them. So it's like just constantly like being in my notes app in my phone and being like, oh, this is interesting. Make this a piece of content. I know everybody does that. Conrad Molden, like friend of the show, friend of ours, like he does, like that's how he started in comedy. He had a notebook, a physical one and one on his phone of just like all these little things that he thought was funny. And if you watch his comedy, you really can kind of tell. His specials are just things he observed and wrote down. And
that's true.
And that's, I think,
you just
anybody
give your take on
it. Just start doing that. Just start observing things that you can retell. Like that's a simple thing.
It's kind of funny how in many ways everything you're describing is basically like keeping a diary back like generations ago. And it's just a different way of doing that. So I think it's really special you guys sharing your stories. I think the big piece of advice is that truly you are storytellers, and everybody here loves seeing your stories here on Weighted Pod. And if they want to see more of you, obviously you have Annie, your story on Annie in Aventurland. Derek, you have your story in robe trotting. And next time you'll be back here on this side of the mic getting to take the host chair again. So thank you everyone for listening today. And thank you for going to the other side of the mics and sharing your stories with your audience.
Thanks for a great interview. And we'll hope you'll come back and
absolutely
visit more.
I'm not dead. I'm still here.
I'm so glad. Please don't be dead. Thanks so much, guys.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Hi.